Hello, Ian here, and welcome back to Darkstorm Rising. Today I'm going to be taking my first tentative steps into my chosen chapter, the Black Templars. Now, one of the things that we can potentially do is we're so keen to build our army that we just rush off and start painting miniatures. But my piece of advice to you guys would be to get a couple of cheaper models and do some practice runs first. Look at what colours go together before you end up committing yourself to a style and later on regret it because you don't really enjoy that style. So what I'm going to do today is I've picked a fairly straightforward model. There's not too much detailing on it, so that we can just have a look at the colour scheme and see if we like the feel. Definitely going to go for a grim dark look and battle worn. So we'll see how that turns out. Over to the table and we'll see how we get on. Before we start painting, we'll just put the figure to one side for a second and we'll just check our equipment. So, wet palette, we have a Ferrero Rocher box with just normal household sponging, a sheet of baking paper placed across the top, not greaseproof paper as that's waterproof. This will allow a little bit of the water to soak into the paper, but not enough to really moisten the paints, enough to keep them wet for a few hours while we're doing our work. How wet do you have a wet palette? Well, I like to keep it so that there's just a nice little puddle forms in the corner of the tray, and that should keep your paints nice and wet for a good few hours. I like to keep a glass of water to clean the brushes, and a bit of tissue just to dry them off and wipe them. Brushes themselves, paints nice and to hand, and then we can make a start. So our first thing is to decide how we're going to paint Eric. And Eric, I think, is going to have white shoulder panels, white abdominal panel, white left hip panel, white right knee panel, and I think the centre panel on the backpack will also go white. So what we'll do is we shall get some of the Vallejo bone white and we shall pop some onto the palette, and everywhere that's going to go white is going to get a base coat. Just a nice tidy base coat over each section. So we'll start with the shoulder pad. And I'm just very tidily going to work around each section and just put a base coat on. I'll do that and we'll come back and look what that looks like. So after the first coat of paint, you can see that the coverage is absolutely dreadful. So we'll do a second coat of paint. But what it does do is it gives you an idea, if we put him a little bit further away, of what the overall figure is going to look like with where we've put the white. And I'm quite happy with that. I think that looks quite nice. So I'm going to go around the model, put a second coat of paint on, and I'll be back in a second. So after our second coat of white, things do look whiter. This is bone white though, so it's not going to look brilliant white. But we still can see areas where the paint really hasn't settled and we haven't got a uniform colour. And I want that to start with. So I'm going to do a third coat of paint and we'll see if we get a bit of an improvement there. So after 3 coats of paint, we've now got a lovely uniform white. It's not quite perfect, but it's a good base now to work from. Quick hint for you here is do give yourself enough areas to work around and be patient with it. If you keep working on an area that's too wet, you'll actually drag paint off as you're working on it. And if you start doing that, it's telling you were doing too much too soon. So just be a little bit patient and slow yourself down. Make a cup of tea, give your paint a chance to dry. So the next thing we're going to do is start to apply some texture. Right, so I've had a little bit of a play while I was working on the left shoulder pad, right shoulder pad, and I wanted to try and get sort of looking dirty battle damage type of an effect. I think we've got that, and then once we get either a transfer or some iconography on there, I think that's going to actually look quite good. So I'll show you how I achieve that on this. So it is just really, it's just playing and just adjusting the colour so that you're happy with it. So we'll do it fairly quick. And then what I'll do is I'll move around the rest of the model and get that done. So a bit of Mournfang brown, a bit of black and a bit of the bone white, mix them together. And that's Citadel Mournfang brown. Okay, so they when mixed together give you quite a nice, I don't know, dirty, concretey, muddy colour. So we're going to ruin this lovely white effect, and what we're going to do is we're going to tend to aim it more into the corners and the bottoms, and just gently just add some texture, little stripes, swipes, and we'll come down to the other edge, and it's nothing particularly tidy. We're just actually just banging in some darker colour and keeping it on the bottom side of the miniature, and then we're going to add a bit of brighter colour. So we've got the Mournfang on its own, we'll add a little bit of that, and we'll just gently touch that in and add it to the border. What I'm in effect trying to do is, if I could see white at the edge of the armour plate, I'm trying to get rid of it, and I'm just adding colour onto it. But what I'm also doing is I'm sneaking little bits of colour up onto the other aspects of the armour. We'll get a little bit of, now this is filthy brown, that's a game colour, and just a few dots of that around. Nothing aimed, nothing accurate. Okay. And then what I need to do is I need to like even that out, but also retaining the texture. So what we'll do is we'll get some of the bone white, we'll get some of this dirty concretey colour, and we'll mix the two together and give ourselves a little bit of a paler texture. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work backwards from the clean stuff and just dabbing, just little touches. I'm not trying to eradicate anything, as in like blend or anything like that. I'm actually just literally introducing colours on top of colours and giving an increasing texture of colours. Okay, now we're going to go for the bone white on its own, and we're just gently going to bring the bone white more into control, and just dots and little hashes on top of the colours we've already just generated, but we're now pushing the colours back. I'm not trying to get rid of it, I'm trying to just push the colours back and reintroduce the bone white. And it is just tiny, tiny little dabs, little bits of stippling all over this area, just taking off little bits of what we've just introduced. Okay. And then I'm going to get some of the bone white, and I'm really getting rid of it off my brush, and then just gently applying it almost like a glaze, and just reasserting that white is the dominant colour here. But in the same breath, I'm not really destroying what I've already put on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reaffirm some of the damage. Go for a little bit of a dark colour, and we're just going to put on a few little scratches, little dabs here and there, reassert some of the darker definition in the edges of the armour. And now we need to remember where the lighting source is coming from, so we'll get back to the bone white, and we want lighting source above, and we'll just dab, 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 tiny little flecks and scratches, move them around, just gently stroking the paint, moving it around, bit of white into the bone white, and just a few little dabs of that on this upper edge where the light's going to be. Get rid of that off the brush. There's already some on the armour, and we'll just move that around a little bit and dab it around. Because the brush is wet, I can also move it as a glaze and use that as well. So we're giving the armour that battered, weathered look. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Guilliman Flesh, Citadel contrast colour. We'll get some of that, just pop that on the palette, and I'm going to mix it with a tiny little bit of another contrast colour, Griffhound Orange. Or Griffhound Orange. Tiny. This is quite a potent colour, so just tiny dab of that. Mix those two together, and that's going to give us a. And we do need to get quite a bit of water mixed in with this. So we'll mix the water, and we're better to go light than we are to go strong to start with. I'm going to work it into the corners and just dab it around the bottom, and it will give us a little bit of a muddy colour. But if I leave it in all of those recesses, what it will do is it will get rid of all the white that's hidden in the corners, and it will make it into more of a uniform shadow. And then I'm going to get a tiny little bit of that's not a tiny bit, a small amount of Garagax Sewer, or Gargax Sewer, no, it's Garagax Sewer, and then run that around the edge of the armour and recreate the edge and give definition. Again, this is a very dark colour, so just be very gentle with it if you're going to add a few scrapes and marks. And then we can come back onto the armour with our brighter colours again and just reaffirm that highlight. And because all of these colours are actually still quite wet, there will be a level of blending going on here as they saturate into each other. And you can continue to just play with the colours, move the mud around, and you decide when you've had enough of playing and getting the colour and the look that you want. So we've not had to use any oil washes or anything like that. We've achieved quite a nice look. And now I think I'm ready to move on around the rest of the model and get that look achieved all over on the white pieces, and then we'll come back again. Okay, so the next step is fairly straightforward, a little bit laborious, but it shouldn't take you too long. So we're going to get some tan earth, and we're going to get a little bit of black and a little bit of tan earth, and we're going to make a base colour to start with, and then dab it dry on our tissue, and then where I want to apply it, and that's virtually all over the model, I just want to create a dirty look. So a bit too wet still. I just gently dab it across the model and build up a primary layer of filth, and just work my way around the model, touching anything really that's black. And just gently work my way over. I'll carry on with the rest of the model and then I'll come back for the next step. So I've been around the model and just basically turned the model dirty, and concentrated dominantly on the lower limbs, because obviously that's closest contact point with the ground. And now what we're going to do is bring some higher shades in, so we'll get just the plain tan earth on its own, and we'll go back over the same areas, touching more dominantly, virtually drying out the brush, touching more dominantly onto the lower portions down where the soil is, accentuating the fact that there's a lot of soil down there. And then as we come up the body, just gentler dabs, little bit less exposure to the milk, but we still want a little bit of coverage, a little bit of texture going on the model. And again, we work our way around. I'll just tidy up and I'll make sure I do a tidy job, and then we come back for the next step. Well, he now looks absolutely filthy, and he's been running around the field. He's really got himself absolutely disgusting. But what we need to do now is start to pick some details out. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to neutral grey, and we're going to catch some edge highlights and work our way around the model. Also doing a little bit of shading as well. So we'll use the shoulder guard as an example. So we're just going to go over the edge of the shoulder and use the edge of the brush to catch the edge of the pad. And we'll do the inside edge as well. And then where we are on the top, where we might catch a little bit of light, we'll just catch across the pad and a little bit more coverage, hash some lines across, brighten that up, and we'll come down the side of the pad. Just get a bit more grey on the brush. And just gently work our way around the model. And then on the higher up sides, we can catch a little bit of light again. Now we don't want to, when you're looking at tidy clean marines, you want tidy clean edges, but this guy's been in a war. So if what we do is, if rather than just doing one smooth clean edge, if we take the brush and we just gently drag, and then now and again we'd make a little bit of a slip. So we're not doing clean full lines, and we're actually trying to get the odd little bit of paint on blobbed over the edge of the armour. And what that will lead your eye to believe is that that is battered dinks in the armour. And once you've worked your way around the armour and you've sold that story to your brain, you'll be quite surprised at how well the result looks. So we're going to go around the full model and do the grey. Just little dinks here and there. We can do little scratch lines across the armour as well, because that helps sell the story. And then when you come to upper shading, if you dilute the grey down a little bit, let's just, and then like on the upper portion of this arm, if we want not only to give him the battle damage on the edges, but also just catch a little bit of light in the armour and just lighten that area up a little bit. Okay, and so we're just basically now going to work our way around the model, popping on these edge highlights. If there's like a edge of a shoulder or a corner where you think it might take a little bit of damage, then you can just pop a little bit of like a star onto the armour and make it look like that was where a scratch occurred. And we'll come down the back here. Oh, a bit untidy. Oh. And we're just slowly working our way around. So I'm going to carry on the rest of the model. And I'm going to continue with the intermittent line, just making it look like we've got a little bit of damage here and there. And I'll come back once we've done this step. Right, so I've been around his armour, touching up the edge highlights, not really touched the chainsaw yet. But gone around the armour and clipped all the edges of his armour, and then deliberately, so when you've done your edge, you can do like little jags off, little lines, and every now and again, if you're just stopping and putting these little that's a bit stronger battle mark. If you put these little battle marks on, then it just adds to the credibility of the story you're creating with your miniature. So just like tiny little cuts and marks on the armour as you're going round. So the next step is to swap from neutral grey over to wolf grey and re-highlight everything you've just done, but this time be a little bit less generous with the paint. So what we're going to do is touch more extreme highlights. So we're going to touch top surface areas, little bits on the inside of wherever we've marked as a highlight. Maybe accentuate some of these little scratch marks. Get plenty of water on your brush and keep it nice and wet. And just keep using the side of your brush for your highlights. And don't forget to do an intermittent jagged line. Don't do a strong one, or else it's going to be a little bit too much. So yeah, we're just going to work our way around the model, highlighting what we've done. If you find that the wolf grey, oh sorry, I didn't show you that one, did I? Where are we? The wolf grey, if you find that that's a little bit too light for your liking, you can always go to Vallejo light grey, or mix a bit of your wolf grey in with your neutral grey, and it'll just bring down the tone a little bit, because it is quite a pale colour, but it just is really going to make those highlights pop. And really stand out and give you some good clear definition on your model, especially on things like your belt straps, your buckle straps, sorry, on your belt here. So you can just gently dust it. Onto your belt, and then because it's not a new belt, we can put like little jags on there. You can, if you want, paint the belt brown, especially if they're wearing robes. Just adds to that authentication. So we're now going to work our way around the model, just doing all of these, highlighting again. quite intermittent. And then every now and again, where we fancy, we just pop a little bit of battle damage on, like a little blob or a hash, little scratch on the armour. And then we're just going to work our way around doing that. So, okay, so I've been around the model and you can see I've put the white highlights on, well, wolf grey, all around the model, and maybe missed a little bit there, lot. So we'll just finish that off. Jaggy little line. Let's do the other side of the gauntlet there. Okay, but I think you can see that he's actually starting to look quite nice, and some decent detail on there. Just pick out the edges here. Okay. So he's looking quite nice. So what we'll do is we'll finish the Aquila and then we'll come back in the next video and we'll tidy up, do the chainsword, we'll do flesh tones, and we'll put some decals on, and we'll do that in the next video. I'll just finish the Aquila for now. We'll keep that nice and simple. So we'll, I think we'll go for colours we've already got. So we'll use the filthy brown. So he's going to be sort of a off gold. We'll go for a bit of black in there. And that can be our initial base tone. So we'll gently just dab onto the top of the skull, stroke each of the feathers, just come downhill with the paint. Okay, so that's going to set, and then we'll also add a little bit of the Mournfang brown as well that we used earlier. We'll just chuck that into the top of the arches of each of the rows of feathers, and that sort of sets our tone for the dirt and the grime. And then we'll go to our sort of concretey coloured mix. So we're going to get a bit of black. We're going to get a little bit of the bone white, and then a little bit of our Mournfang brown, and pop all that together and make some sort of horrible colour mix. And then that's generally going to go on top of all the highlights of where we've already just been. And then, because it's actually meant to be sort of a blacky colour, we'll go to grey next, and just keep on all those highlights. Gentle touch, even with your brush strokes. We'll get a little touch of the wolf grey, and just really pick out the upper surface notes, edges of the feathers. And then, just to put a little bit of dirt back in, we will go for Skeleton Horde, I think. Citadel contrast colour. And just before we go anywhere near the model with it, I just want to have a look at, yeah, we've not really come very bright yet with the Aquila, so I think I'm going to come a little bit brighter and get some white on there. There we go. Right on the very edges. And then we'll get our skeleton horde, and I think mix it with a tiny little bit of the Gargax sewer that we had from earlier. But you're going to have to be really, really careful with this because that is such a dark colour. But what I want to do is really make it look dark and grimy in the tops of the arches of the feathers. Now for the final step is where we're going to get a little bit of, actually we won't use plate now, I think we'll go for gunmetal, and we'll pop some little bits of little scratches, little dinks here and there of gunmetal on the armour where we've got marks. Little scratch here and there. Just to show that some of the armour has been knocked off and that a little bit of the underlying metal is showing through. And again, to your brain, it just sells that picture. Okay, maybe a little ding up here as well. There we are. So I think he's looking quite reasonable so far. So we'll come back, and what you can do, just to accentuate like a scar line, is where we've got this dink here on the knee. If we get a little bit of black and just strike a line underneath it, it'll just accentuate that. Not, we can, if you want to be really clever, put them around the marks on the armour, but actually it's black armour, so you can get away with that, I think. I'll probably, before the next session, I'll just go around and dry brush some gunmetal on the exhaust ports here and on the chain at the back of the armour. I'll probably also just put some neutral grey across the backs of the leg armour, and on the joins of the arm armour. I don't think you need to watch me really do that, but what we'll do is we'll concentrate next time on decals and flesh tones, as well as finishing off the chainsword. Well, that was really exciting. I really enjoyed painting the miniature. Haven't painted a Black Templar ever before, was picking the colours on the fly, but did enjoy the process. I think in the future there are some nuances that I would change and try and get a bit more of a realistic look, but quite happy with the Grim Dark look that we achieved. Hope you're going to stay tuned to finish off the miniature. I'll probably do that video tomorrow. If you did enjoy this one, please do like and subscribe. And there's only really one thing left to say, and that's, are we painting minis yet? Hell yeah! Catch you in that next video, guys.